The US House of Representatives has voted to demand the Pentagon investigate the alleged involvement of US military personnel in torturing detainees at secret prisons in Yemen. According to a UN report, suspects at the sites were exposed to beatings, electrocution and sexual violence. Some were imprisoned in a metal cell in the sun. Others were denied medical treatment. Now, there are reportedly 18 secret torture prisons in Yemen and neighbouring countries. The sites are mostly run by one of the main US allies in the region, and that's the United Arab Emirates. Now, those prisons were reported on in an investigation by the Associated Press. Their sources at the Pentagon acknowledged that US forces had been involved in interrogations, but denied any participation or knowledge of abuse. However, even if that was the case, this could still amount to complicity and torture if American personnel interrogated detainees who had been tortured. Human rights advocates have condemned the reported methods of interrogation.
The U.S. hasn't learned the lesson that cooperating with forces that are torturing detainees and ripping families apart is not an effective way to fight extremist groups.
The United Arab Emirates has officially denied any involvement in running secret prisons in Yemen, as well as torturing suspects. Well, let's bring in a guest now. Let's go live to political analyst Marwa Osman. Marwa, thank you for joining us on the programme. Tell us your thoughts. Will the Pentagon's investigation reap any results?
Well, the idea of them starting an investigation is definitely not new, and especially not new considering the events, knowing that the U.S. Army and the U.S. CIA has been involved in torture for as long as I can remember. But I can bring up dates, and I can bring up maybe events of, starting from the Vietnam War, entering into the war on Iraq, where they had, we all know, and we have seen the tortures of Abu Ghraib prison, and also going through Lebanon, for example, southern Lebanon, when it was by their allies, by the Israeli entity occupied. They also had the Khian detention center and Ansar detention center, where tortures were a normal thing to do. Now, when we go to Yemen, this has been the case for the past 3 years. I mean, we have in our Arab media, we have heard about this. We have even seen some photos about this for as back as 3 years now, about these prisons that are run by the United Arab Emirates that torture people, and they inflict all sorts of psychological torture as well on them by holding their families as well hostage. So I think this is something that the U.S. has known about, but the investigation is only new because it was set out by representatives from the House of Representatives. Now, whether or not this will be taken seriously, we're going to have to wait and see, because I think it's going to have to be 120 days of investigations until the report is out, despite the fact that 120 days, which means more, 120 days of torture for these prisoners inside of these camps, detention camps run by the UAE. The real question here is, are we going to see also some sort of an investigation concerning the US-made bombs that are falling on the heads of the Yemenis as well?
There's been very little coverage in the media about these allegations. Why do you think that is?
Well, basically, when it's something related to the imperial world, it's related to the Western world, especially when the U.S. Cover-up is a major issue. I mean, look at the current CIA, head of the CIA. I mean, she has an entire history of torture, and it was well known, and still she got to be the head of the CIA. This is not a matter of whether the U.S. does it or not. I mean, what's laughable for me was when the California Democratic representative, Mr. Khanna, who actually issued or demanded such an investigation, he literally said, this is not the way that the U.S. does business. Oh, I bet it is, and I promise it is. This is what the U.S. has been doing all over the world in every base that it has. Every time they catch someone, allegedly someone who is linked to terrorism, or at least someone who is against the U.S. Imperial demands or requests inside of this country, they are treated like animals, even worse. They are treated in torture centers. They are, I mean, can you really deny the fact that the U.S. is involved in this when we have seen what have been done in Abu Ghraib, Libya, for example? But it is heart aching that we don't know exactly how deep it goes inside of Libya. I'm talking about the U.S. Involvement, especially with torture cells. Now, when we talk about Yemen in specific, the entire Yemeni war has been not covered properly by the mainstream media, especially because it has been funded and waged by a major ally for the US, which is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Even the numbers, if you want to talk about the numbers of fatalities, the number of people who are even dying from diseases inside of Yemen, the numbers that we get from the UN are not entirely true, to be honest, because the UN representatives cannot bear to be in all of these places that are highly risky and that are fatal places for them. So basically, when we want to talk about Yemen, it's more related to what the US wants to cover more than what the US wants to uncover for the media.
Okay, political analyst Marwa Osman, thank you for your time and sharing your thoughts on this issue.